Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Ever since 9.15, Blizzard added a feature where as long as you have one character at 80 renown, your main and alts can now switch covenants anytime they want to, with no 2-week questlines or restrictions. This will open up a flood of possibilities for a variety of different players, so many different playstyles for you to explore and try out. If you want to play the most meta builds out there, you can just switch covenants at a whim before you raid or a dungeon. Or what's even more fun, trying out some of the different covenants that aren't considered good, but trying to see if there's any value in those covenants whatsoever. As someone who enjoys experiment with different builds and with this opportunity to try a bunch of different covenants, as someone who's primarily been playing Venthyr so far, this is my opportunity to try Necrolord, Venthyr, Kyrian, and Nightfave for rogues and compare them against each other. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. With so many of you guys asking me what's a good class to level for 9.15, Rogue should definitely be one of those classes. We're doing really well so far in raids, dungeons, and PvP, and most likely will do fantastic for 9.15. So let's take a look at the different covenants you get to pick from for 9.15 for rogues. But first, most of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed, and it seems like the more I remind you, the more of you guys sub. So if you're watching these videos on a regular, subscribe, hit the bell as well, especially if you want to catch some of the future WoW updates. So let's start taking a look at some of the rogue covenants. Starting off with the Kyrian, a standard choice and a powerful choice currently for patch 9.15. Kyrian Rogue has proven itself to be really good for out rogues and subtlety, particularly in the recent sims for pure single target. And while not considered amazing for assassination, it still does offer as a powerful choice for all 3 specs within PvP. The Kyrian ability of Echo and Reprimand is still a fantastic option, very simple to play with, maybe a little too simple for some of you that like complexity. It still offers fantastic damage output as well as an animate charge combo point, which can be enhanced further with the legendary. Then there's the Vial, which is still a very powerful defensive option, providing you heal but also removing curses, diseases, bleeds, and even providing you defensives depending on the soul binds that you run. Currently the soul binds for Kyrian are pretty bog standard. Pelagos offers mastery and just random damage procs. Kaleo offers healing but also a lot of crit, and rogues are invested into crit right now, as well as Mechanicus, who offers you cooldown reduction on your covenant ability. Paired together with a legendary, it does create an active playstyle. For PvP, this covenant provides you quite a bit of defensiveness off the bat, with some traits to modify it to be even more tankier, as well as damage that has burst to it but also is very consistent on a very short cooldown and pretty competitive. I would say Kyrian currently is a very strong choice going into 9.15. Even as Assassination Rogue for most guides, they don't really speak about it favorably, but if it ends up being your favorite playstyle, I feel like playing Kyrian Assassination, while it might not be super synergetic, it's not the worst pick in the world. Next we have the Necrolord Covenant, and in 9.15 it's looking still very powerful for AoE. This has been a notoriously strong covenant for any rogue spec when it comes to dungeon groups, and in terms of just raw AoE data for sims, it still is as powerful as it was before. The Bone Spike ability in 9.15, while still doesn't provide you the greatest single target damage, it does provide you probably the smoothest gameplay experience, as the spikes are very low on energy and can build you quite a few combo points. For single target, it doesn't offer you nearly as much damage, but the smoothness of gameplay is definitely noticeable. Then there's Fleshcraft, which is still incredibly strong for PvP and just overall one of the best defensive abilities in the game. The soul binds for Necrolords are pretty boring. Marileth ends up being the better PvP choice for some of the CC immunity, recovery, as well as decent single target damage. And Many is still a decent option for small groups like Mythic Plus dungeons. And finally, Eormir is actually a very strong soulbind because of how heavily rogues are invested into Critical Strike. The Necrolord Soulbind is pretty synergetic with all 3 specs, maybe a little bit less for subtlety on single target damage output, but in AoE for all 3 specs it is still a very dominant dungeon option. It is also a very solid choice for PvP. Even though Fleshcraft got nerfed in 9.15, it still retains a lot of its strength. The one thing I could say about Necrolords is the playstyle in AoE can feel like a frenzy. You feel like there's a lot of abilities going on because you're constantly churning out bone spikes, generating combo points, and committing into finishers. While not the strongest single target damage output, it is definitely a comfort pick. If you're new to Rogue, I recommend go Necrolord. The low energy cost of bone spikes, compared to the potential combo points they can generate, makes maintaining buffs and debuffs far easier, which does give you a way smoother playstyle overall. If you're new to Rogue or you struggle generating the amount of combo points and energy and feel like you're constantly starved on both resources, Necrolord solves a lot of those issues and gives you a feel-good gameplay no matter which spec you play it as. Then we have the Venthyr Covenant for Rogues, a very competitive, pure single target burst damage output covenant. It is not the strongest single target damage, but depending on the spec, it could be. Currently, it's very synergetic with all 3 rogue specs. Even Outlaw Rogue, which most people still assume is a mostly AoE spec, it does benefit quite a bit in single target. The Covenant ability of Flagellation is a very powerful option, especially if you play Subtlety Rogues, because they have a conduit that increases all shadow damage they do. This ability actually benefits from the conduit, which is kinda crazy, and the haze that it provides benefits Assassination as well as Outlaw quite greatly in burst. As a melee, you might find Dora Shadows a little bit clunky because it is ability with a cast time, and rogues don't really cast spells or anything. But if you do get used to this ability, it is a fantastic mobility option for a lot of the different dungeons as well as raid fights. The Soulbinds for Venthyr saw a few improvements as we got more renown, with Nadia really leading it for 2 of the 3 specs, with a big haste buff, extra single target damage output, as well as critical strikes and versatility on a proc. We also have Theotar, which provides good mastery versatility as well as random stats, which benefits subtlety. Then we have Draven, which is a very tanky option. It kinda sorta works in PvP, but rogues have also used it in higher tier dungeons. The Flagellation ability on a 1.5 minute CD synergizes kind of okay with the different playstyles for rogues. However, the legendary is where a lot of that gameplay really changes. As you spend calm points into finishers while Flagellation is up, you actually reduce the cooldown of that ability, so it becomes a 1 minute CD roughly, which better synergizes into the rest of the rogue's toolkit. But even if you don't use the legendary, the 1.5 minute CD for the damage that it does is definitely worth your while. This burst translates exceptionally well into PvP, and that's one of the reasons why Venthyr is actually a very solid choice for rogues, just on the damage alone. Venthyr synergizes a lot better into subtlety, particularly Mythic Pluses. While it doesn't offer great AoE damage, the focus damage that you get with the legendary allows you to focus down the biggest bad in a single trash group. There's usually one mob that's like the caster that does the most amount of damage, or somebody who has the most health, where for subtlety has been extremely synergetic in that department. For Assassination, it's mostly a single target option, and for Outlaw, it's a bit of an obscure one that actually has some sims to back it up. Overall, Venthyr is a solid choice if you do end up picking this covenant for rogues. Then we have Night Fae. Back in the day, Night Fae was the best covenant for rogues, no matter what spec you played, whether you did AoE or single target damage. While Night Fae didn't really get any buffs or nerfs as of recently, it did fall off quite a bit, where every single guide out there for PvE marks Night Fae Rogue as underwhelming. Looking at the Sims, however, it is not that far behind the other covenants, but if you're someone who chases that 0.01% damage increase, you probably won't end up playing Night Fae. But I don't want to leave Night Fae off besmirched, I do want to explore it like I did the other covenants. Sepsis is a poison dot that kind of ticks out on the enemy, and the final burst does a bit more nature damage. It synergizes with Assassination Shift playstyle. After Sepsis expires on a target, it gives you access to 1 stealth ability. While you might think this is amazing for a variety of different builds, it really comes down to using Ambush or Shadow Strike. I really wish you could use Garrote together with Assassination in order to apply a Silence or an Empowered Garrote with Subterfuge, but it doesn't work like that. Soul Shape, on the other hand, is probably the best mobility ability in the game of all the covenants, and it is super nice even on mobile class like a rogue. The Soulbinds is where I think it gets interesting, because the covenant ability can actually be affected by those Soulbinds. From Naya, you're able to give yourself quite a bit of mastery, especially more mastery if you use it in groups and your partner is of a different covenant. Then you have Dreamweaver, which can give you just passive damage towards the target, which can be good single target increase, but also a haste buff as a field of blossoms under you. As long as you stand in that field, you gain quite a bit of haste for quite a long while. Then Korain still benefits you with massive crit, especially if you hit new targets, and with some more augments to continue churning out more damage whenever you hit a new enemy. I would have to say that the Night Fae Soulbinds to this day are still some of the strongest Soulbinds I've ever seen. I think they are objectively better than what any other covenant can offer. I think where maybe the rogue falls behind a bit on is maybe how the ability of Sepsis and its cooldown doesn't quite synergize into the rogue's playstyle. It's not that Sepsis is bad, but the damage for 1.5 minute is pretty low. Where Sepsis becomes interesting is how it gets augmented by your Soulbinds. So weave Sepsis as you using your big cooldown abilities, but Rogue is a 1 to a 2 minute class, and Sepsis is a 1.5 minute CD, so it makes synergizing those a little bit awkward. In PvP, it still is a decent option, and it did get a change towards its legendary that will provide some of the strongest buffs to different specs of rogues, so depending on your spec, you'll be able to get Vendetta, Shadowblades, or Adrenaline Rush. In PvP, this is where a little bit of hype exists, because for subtlety rogues with this legendary, you could have on your hands a subtlety rogue with all these different damage modifiers doing absolutely astonishing burst, and pairing all that damage together with the Vendetta just to make it even more deadly. But in the end, if you do end up playing Night Fae because you like the transmog or you just want to try it out, give it a go, I don't think it is the worst choice either. Even though the guides don't really recommend Night Fae if you're trying to play the game seriously, look at some of the sims for rogues in terms of the differences of covenants and performance. Night Fae rogue is not the worst combination out there. There are plenty of different class covenant combos that are just super bad for one another because of just the way that they're designed. There's a bit of friction in between of the class designed for a class, but also they designed for the covenant ability, and they just don't work together. For rogues, technically all three of them are fine. If let's say you had a Mythic Plus dungeon group and you're trying to push some keys and you're missing the Night Fae buff and none of you really want to roll Night Fae, the rogue could easily go Night Fae and not really lose out on too much damage, while also gaining quite a bit of benefit for the group. Because of that, because of the sims that do show that the covenants are still somewhat close, if you do end up playing Night Fae rogue, it's not the worst option. It doesn't really synergize super well and it's not recommended, and you might even find the playstyle with Sepsis not really super rewarding. But if this for one reason or another is just your favorite build, it is your favorite playstyle, you shouldn't feel too guilty about playing something off meta, because for rogues just about everything works okay. Anyway, this has been my video on checking out rogue covenants for 915. I've been playing with a bunch of them as of recently, and I'm definitely going to be maxing them all out with maximum renown, most likely on my main rogue. Seriously consider running a rogue for 915. We're in a fantastic spot right now, and if things stay this way, and maybe we get some kind of a raid utility in 9.2, then we'll be even better spec in the next build. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really do hope you guys enjoyed. If you enjoyed these kind of discussion videos of just us exploring something different for a new patch, let me know in the comments below or just give this video a thumbs up. As per always, the channel Discord is in description. You guys are always welcome to join it anytime. That's probably the best place to reach me. Thank you all so much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in the next one.